The once bustling Green Haven apartment complex stood eerily silent. The flickering hallway lights cast long shadows on the cracked walls. Hyun-soo, a troubled teenager, leaned against his apartment door, staring blankly at the floor. He had moved here only weeks ago, escaping his painful past, but now he found himself trapped in a nightmare. The outbreak started 3 days ago. People were turning into grotesque, savage monsters, beasts driven by their darkest desires. Hyun-soo had witnessed his neighbor, Mr. Kong, transform into a monstrous mass of writhing limbs. It wasn't a disease, it was something darker, something primal. Day 1. Hyun-soo heard a scream echoing through the building as he stood by his window. He saw Mrs. Park, a kind old woman from the 4th floor, pounding on someone's door, begging for help. Her cries turned guttural, then fell silent. Moments later, a distorted figure, her figure, lurched into the hallway, its glowing eyes scanning for prey. Hyun-soo locked his door and backed away, his heart pounding in his chest. The power went out that night. The world outside the complex seemed to collapse into chaos, but inside, the real terror had just begun. Day 2. By morning, the survivors began to band together. There were only a handful: Jae-hyun, the building's stoic maintenance worker, Hyun-soo, a single mother who refused to let her daughter leave her side, and Ik-young, a former firefighter who quickly took charge. Hyun-soo, despite his quiet demeanor, joined them reluctantly, feeling he had no other choice. "We have to stick together," Ik-young said, her voice firm. "These monsters, they were human once. And if we lose our humanity, we'll be no different from them." Their first task was to secure the building. They blocked off the stairwells and barricaded the main entrance. Food and water were scarce, but Jae-hyun reassured them that the maintenance room had supplies. The horrors grew worse. The monsters, once neighbors and free. Day 3. The group ventured to the upper floors in search of survivors and supplies. They found a young boy hiding in a closet, clutching a stuffed rabbit. His parents had turned, but he had survived. "My name's Min-jun," he whispered. Hyun-soo carried Min-jun back to their makeshift safe zone. The boy's innocent trust stirred something in him, a faint spark of hope. For the first time in years, Hyun-soo felt a purpose beyond his own survival. That night, the group faced their worst challenge yet. A hulking, twisted monster with razor-sharp claws broke through their barricades. Ik-young and Jae-hyun fought valiantly, but it was Hyun-soo who ultimately lured the creature away, using himself as bait. Cornered in a dead-end hallway, he thought he was done for, until Eun-ju appeared with a makeshift flamethrower, engulfing the monster in flames. The fight for humanity. As the group regrouped, Ik-young reminded them of what was at stake. These monsters, they're not just physical. They're what happens when we lose who we are. Fear, anger, greed, it's all in us. But we can't let it win. Hyun-soo, for the first time, spoke up. "We still have each other. That has to mean something." Together, they reinforced their defenses and shared stories of their lives before the outbreak. They laughed, cried, and remembered what it felt like to be human. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the darkness at bay. As days turned into weeks, Green Haven became more than a shelter, it became a beacon of resilience. Though the monsters prowled outside, the survivors held on to their humanity, knowing that their greatest weapon wasn't just fire or barricades, but the unyielding strength of hope and connection. And in the midst of it all, Hyun-soo found a reason to keep going, not just to survive, but to protect the fragile light they had built together.